I had
Yep.
one time.
Where'd you go?
From Seattle, I drove east.
On I-90?
Yeah, through Kalispell to
Oh, you went across the top.
Glacier National Park.
Great
then
country.
up to Calgary.
Come on in. There
Oh.
he is.
And then
How are
back,
you?
What's going
did a
on?
loop
Good to see you.
back to Vancouver and then back
Doing
down
well.
to
How about
Seattle.
you?
It was good. Everything was good. Hello.
Yeah, it's glorious country. I've been to back in the day. Used to
This is back in,
when it was just a
1980.
routine thing when you
Just
go
make it,
across the border into Canada. You just had to say, "Yeah, I'm a U.S. citizen, and I'm not." Well, the main thing they were concerned with is that you were bringing fruit or vegetables that had bugs in them that they didn't want to get in their stuff.
Right, I remember that.
Didn't have to have a passport or anything.
We also was in Yellowstone in August of 1969. But we didn't make it up to.
Well, back in my checkered career when I was getting out of college, I drove a tour, 73 and 74, I drove a tour bus in Yellowstone Park for 2 summers. Yeah, I've been a Rolling Stone gathering lots of moss.
And then,
I may ask somebody to, if I give you my phone, would you mind, I'll turn it on and get me some video too?
Sure, I can do that.
Well, she's gonna.
Yeah, we
it's
got
gonna
a
be
GoPro
posted- It's
here.
gonna be posted on YouTube.
Yeah, I know, kind of for my own purposes. Yeah, I'm gonna borrow the YouTube version. I don't, maybe that's totally sufficient. You probably
Yeah, that's
do a
fine.
better job than me.
Yeah, we can do that.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'll just ask somebody to get a picture of me with the podium. Yeah, that'll do. Make it real simple. Well, let's see, what's our official time? We've got about 2 or 3 minutes.
now, I always wanted to go to Little Bighorn and Custer's Last Stand because George Armstrong was born in Ohio. Southeast
Yeah, he was
Ohio.
Ohio, and then he's kind of associated with Michigan too.
Right.
Yeah. I'm about 50 miles from. I live in Billings, which is about 50 miles
I was
from
going to say, how far is Billings
No,
from
we went to the Dodgers Nationals last week.
Little Bighorn?
About 50, a little over 50 miles, straight down I-90.
Roughly.
Yeah.
4 runs on Sunday.
That part of Montana just pretty much high prairie.
Well, it's the correct name is the High Great Plains. Billings sits. What I love about Billings is it's centered to the southwest. 55, about an hour's drive, are the tallest mountains in Montana, the Beartooths. And then you go to the east, you've got the Great Plains, you've got lots of wonderful country out there, lots of history. Not only the Little Bighorn battle, but, and I confess my ignorance until a couple of years ago, there, in the summer and spring of 1876, the Sioux War, as it's often called, it started with a battle called the Powder River Battle over by the town of Broadus. And then a week before Custer had his very bad day, there was a big battle at on the Rosebud. Is it Rosebud Creek or Rosebud River? It's known as the Battle of the Rosebud. So if you want to get the whole picture of what led up to Little Bighorn, pretty easy to get to Rosebud Valley. Now you have to go down, and that's a state park. If you go to the Powder River battlefield, that's down a gravel road and it's on private property now, but there's a memorial there too.
The Rosebud, that's South Dakota, right?
No, this is the Rosebud in Montana. We got lots of rosebuds all over. There's
Oh, there's
Rosebud
more than
County.
one? I didn't know.
Yeah, there's more than one rosebud. just to keep you guessing.
Well, where's the original Rosebud? The first
That is I don't know. You stumped me.
Well, you know, in Ohio, there's a couple towns. There's a New Philadelphia, and a New Baltimore. Well, obviously, that's not the original. Those settlers came from.
Yeah, and then I believe there's a Wyoming, Pennsylvania, and then there's the state of Wyoming. Well, I'll just give a couple more minutes, see if anybody else triples in.
Have you ever been to Anaconda or?
Oh, yeah.
I'm of Croatian ancestry, and there's supposedly a big Croatian, or was a big Croatian community in Butte and Anaconda.
Well, Butte's a really colorful place. We call it Butte, America, not Butte, Montana, because back in the day, little trivia history, back in when the copper mines were going, Butte had close to 100,000 people. It was the biggest city between Minneapolis and Seattle. It's maybe got 35,000 now. So, because the underground mines are gone, it's above ground copper mining that's been going on for some years. But yeah, every ethnic group in the world. In fact, the story I heard was during what they like to think of themselves with Irish. They have a great St. Patrick's Day celebration. During the so-called Troubles over in Northern Ireland, the story I heard is that on a per capita basis, Butte contributed more money to what do they call it? The Irish Republican Army than any place else in the country. They wear their Irish on their shoulder. And MCnally's roots are Butte Irish. His grandparents and his parents grew up in Butte before they became Billings
It's the
people.
hometown of Evel Knievel, too.
Yes, it is. It sure is. Yeah, when he passed, they had a huge deal there. Huge wait for him.
I was always a big Evel Knievel fan.
Yeah, he was something else.
He was crazy. He was crazy.
I think I shall give it a shake and do a start.
You need anything before you start, like a drink or anything?
If you've got a glass of water, I don't think I'll die of thirst,
I
but
can get you
I
a bottle of
appreciate it.
water.
Bottle of water? Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I'll be right back.
Is this your first time in Baltimore?
Yes and no. Back in my corporate days, I'm fully retired from that. I did come for training out in Columbia. Flew in on a Tuesday night, went to a session on Wednesday, flew home on Thursday. That's my.
What time of the year was it?
It was 2016. It was like, remember a big snowstorm you had here?
Yeah.
I remember taking my rental car, and most of the snow was gone, but what really threw me for a loop, I remember going down some main drag out there where there were two lanes that went off to the right. And the snow plowing was such they had put a big pile of snow in the far right turn lane. And I said, whoa, I guess I better.
There you go, sir.
Thank you. Let's see. I
So
just
anyway,
need-
it wasn't a time of the year when the Orioles were playing.
No, it was way early season. It was. Do you remember that big snowstorm you guys had in 10 years ago? It was right after, maybe it was early March. It was cool and there was still some snow around, but you could pretty much drive. Although the morning that I had to go out to the airport, I went to the front desk of my hotel and I said, am I going to run into ice on the road with my rental car? And the clerk assured me that probably would have melted by then, and it was fine.
How much snow you get in Billings?
Well, it depends. Our all-time record is 70 or 80 inches. This year we had no snow to speak of. We had a couple storms. We've already had our first 80-degree day. Billings is sometimes called jokingly the banana belt of Montana. It's pretty temperate. Temperate by Montana standards. We can get some sub-zero weather. Well, I think I'll get started. Thank you all for being here, especially since I've come a fur piece. I flew in here from Salt Lake City. My wife is from Salt Lake City, so we drove from Billings down to Salt Lake City. We together have a whole slew of kids from her previous marriage, so she's there, and I flew in from Salt Lake City on early Wednesday morning, I guess. And the reason I came here is, of course, to talk about, share with you some things from this is my 5th book, Dave McNally, The Montana Who Revolutionized Baseball. I will be glad to take questions about anything after I finish, or interrupt me at any time, I don't care. But what I'm going to talk about is an event that I'm pretty sure all of you are very familiar with, the 1970 World Series, Game 3, when Dave McNally hit what was the first and still remains the only Grand Slam home run by a pitcher in World Series history. I'm going to tell you kind of the story behind it. And before I go much further, in the book I derived some of the description from a YouTube segment that I found of that game, okay? So, as I mentioned before, this is Game 3. Palmer and Cuellar have won the first 2 games out in Cincinnati. The series comes to Memorial Stadium. Dave is pitching on October 13th, 1970. And what I love about this is so poetic. It's a day game. Remember back when they used to play mostly day games, at least for postseason. And Dave McNally, it's a national NBC broadcast. And who's at the mic for NBC other than Kurt Gowdy? Some of you may know that, but he's a Wyoming guy. So as Gowdy described it, the bases are loaded in the 6th. It's his 3rd at bat, and he says there's a building panned that greeted him. And the TV scans the stands, and it shows his wife Jean. She's wearing a hat and a dress. Remember, this is a more dress-up time than now. And then they show Dave's season batting average, a massive 133. Now, to be fair, Dave, when he was a little leaguer in Billings, of course, gets little league pitching, was not a bad hitter, but he was not exactly a power-hitting pitcher. Wayne Granger's on the mound. He gets the count to 2-2, as Gowdy put it, trying to get McNally to chase a bad pitch. Dave's got a little grin on his face. He's waiting, and he fouls a pitch for left field, and then he connects. And here's how Gowdy said it. That's hit pretty good. Grand slam home run. Dave rounds the bases, goes to the dugout. He gets a pat in the back from Frank Robinson. And his home run, those of you who've been to games in Memorial Stadium know better than me because I've never been there. It goes into the left field bleachers about 360 feet away. Gowdy says, World Series history has just been made. Dave McNally has become the first pitcher to hit a World Series Grand Slam home run. And that powered the Orioles to an 8-1 win, and of course they eventually won the series. But as someone here mentioned, Mike Cuellar had hit a Grand Slam home run against the Twins in the playoff series. So here's where the story really gets interesting. Okay, in the middle of the 7th inning, old Yankee Tony Kubek, he's the color commentator for NBC by this time, they send him out in the stands to track, and he tracks down Jean, Dave's wife, now widow, and their son Jeff, the oldest at the time. He's 7. He's now early 60s. He's a doctor in Salt Lake, or in the Park City, Utah area. And he goes up to Jean and he says, "What do you think of your husband's home run?" She says, "Great, so exciting." And they banter back and forth. Why are you so nervous? Dave doesn't look nervous at all. And then it really gets fun. Kubik turns to Jeff, the 7-year-old, and he's got a suit and a tie on. And he puts the mic in his face. Is this child cruelty? And he says, "Jeff, when your pop came up with the bases loaded, what were you thinking about?" Perfect deadpan. I don't think Jeff, I know Jeff, I don't think he's ever lived this down. He says to a national audience, I thought he wasn't going to get a hit. I thought he was going to get an out. With a validation like that from your kid, how can things go wrong? But then it gets even better, because Dave was the baby of a family of 4 kids, a sister and then 2 older brothers. The only one who's alive still to this day is his sister Dee. She's into her 90s. She lives in Billings. She had become a legal secretary after she got out of high school in the 50s, and she told me that she and her mother would try and work their schedules. Her mother worked as a supervisor at the Yellowstone County Welfare Department, and Dee was a legal secretary. She'd try to get off in time to get early evening Little League games, because how could she not do it? Dave's my baby brother. So by 1970, she had tried to get some better pay. She goes down to Phoenix. She goes to work for a law firm where the principal is a man named John J. O'Connor. His wife, Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman Supreme Court Justice, appointed by Ronald Reagan in 1981, I think. And if you know anything about law firms, and I do know a little bit about law firms, and I verified this with my sister, who's a retired lawyer, there's kind of a class system where, generally speaking, lawyers and legal secretaries don't socialize together. But that afternoon, October 13th, the guys at the firm are going to watch the game in the boardroom, and they know that Dee's brother is pitching. They say, Dee, come on in, watch the game. And here's how Dee described it when I talked to her. She says, Dave came up to bat. I said, oh no, he can't hit the broadside of a barn. And then he cracks that grand slam home run. I never lived that down around the firm, and I don't know if she ever lived it down the rest of her until Dave was gone.
Funny thing is, he had a home run in '69 World Series.
Yeah, he had a regular home run. Yeah, I know he had, and I think he had it. I have to look this up. I think he'd had at least one other regular season home run. And the story doesn't end there, because in 2020, Dave passed away from cancer in 2002, so sadly he's gone, so he doesn't get to enjoy this moment, but others do. The Billings Gazette, my old newspaper, it's the 50th anniversary, and they decided to run a special story about that, written by a former sports writing colleague of mine, not that it really matters. And the story kind of recaps everything I've told you before about the lead up to the home run and Kurt Dowdy and all this other stuff, but we're really gets fun. Oh, and I should mention Dave's mother, Beth, who passed away after Dave in 2008. I never met her. I really wish I had, because she raised her 4 kids after her husband was killed. He was a junior Navy officer, was killed in the final days, waning days of World War II out in the Pacific. She raised her 4 kids. Fortunately, she had a college degree and was able to keep the family together, raise them all to adulthood and successful adults. She was at the game, and here's what Jean said. She told in the Gazette story. Obviously, when Tony came up, I was almost too excited to even talk. And Jeff was so cute because he thought his dad was going to strike out. I think we were all kind of speechless, did this really happen? It was so exciting. Here's some little context. In 2020, the Major League Baseball Network had just broadcast the whole 1970 series, among other things. And that gave the whole family a chance to bask in that wonderful historic moment. And Jeff McNally, their oldest, had never seen the interview until that time. He says, I remember the interview and kind of what it said, but I'd never seen it. It kind of threw me for a loop a little bit. So he's watching. He's a successful doctor in Utah. Still is there these days. He watches the replay of Game 3 with his wife Cass, and they're home in Utah, and they're texting with 3 of their 4 children who live in California. He told me, I've used that Grand Slam many, many times in conversations. It's super cool baseball trivia point. And what's really fun, he says, you should watch the interview, if for nothing else to see the plaid sports coat I was wearing and the super wide tie. My kids just humbled me. Dad, you're the biggest nerd. That's what his kids said. But he takes it in stride. He's still got a ticket and a program from that game. And of course, if you've been to Cooperstown, and I haven't, I plan to get there, you can see a memento of that game. The bat that he borrowed from Kurt Martin and the baseball that he hit into the stands is still in some kind of a display there. And of course, a number of us think that Dave belongs full-fledged in the Hall of Fame, if not because of his 184 career wins, but equally for his role in helping create free agency, what I call the theme of my book, which is giving not just baseball players, but helping indirectly other pro athletes get workplace fairness. So that's the end of my quote prepared remarks, and I'd be glad to take any and all questions from you.
How long does it take to drive from Billings to Salt Lake City? And is there any flights out of Billings?
Oh yeah, there's lots of flights out of Billings, but it was just more convenient because my wife, as I say, she said, you go, I'll stay and spend time with my kids. She's got 5 adult kids. She grew up in the Salt Lake City area, 5 adult kids in that area, and 1 daughter, husband, and a bratty little granddaughter who lives in New York City. So she said, you just go. And so that's how it came. But driving, Billings is kind of equidistant to Salt Lake City and Denver. In both cases, 550 miles. It's a very full day, especially when you're driving. We have one of these big van type motorhomes. Set the cruise control for about 67 or 68. And we get there, when it's dark, almost dark, if we start early enough in the morning. Yes, sir.
I might be wrong, but I'm guessing, because we were talking about who may have started that game, that he hit the Grand Slam. For some reason, my memory goes back to Cloninger, Tony Cloninger.
I think you're right. That has this ring. Yeah, I think.
I could be wrong. I would have to look it up. But, just, that's why.
And ironically, well, I think at that time, Billings had a minor league team for many years. It was a Class C team. For example, Dick Strangeglove Stewart passed through town. Originally a Brooklyn Dodgers farm team. They might have been a Cardinals team at one point, I can't remember. They were a farm, and then they kind of put it on the back burner in the 60s, and then they came back in 69. They were a farm team. You remember the Seattle Pilots?
Sure. 1 year.
One year they were the Pilots, and then when did the Pilots become the Brewers?
Yep, they did.
And then they became a farm team of the Royals for a long time, and then they were a farm team of the Reds. Most of the time that I was a sports writer for the Gazette, we had some great years. And now, of course, now it's Rookie League, the Pioneer League, and with the major leagues having shunted off most of their lower teams, all the Pioneer League teams are independent, where guys get signed for a contract and they hope that a major league scout will spot them and say, hey, I think you got some promise, I want you to sign a contract.
Was your nickname of the team the same through all the years?
Yes, it's always been the Mustangs.
Mustangs.
Yes, sir.
In Billings, is there any recognition of plaque, a statue of MCnally, or?
Yes, glad you asked. At our we had a place, there's a whole separate story of the name of our baseball field for many, many years called Cobb Field, not named for Ty Cobb, but named for another man named Cobb from Billings, Bob Cobb, who went down to Los Angeles and owned the Brown Derby and the Hollywood Stars back in the old days. But in 2008, by the time they had knocked down the old stadium, they built, it's called Dealer Park, D-E-H-L-E-R Park. Two local sculptors created. Right now, if you go to that baseball stadium, you will see a bronze of MCnally, and you will see a bronze of the other guy who's probably even more than MCnally, Mr. Baseball in Billings, Montana, Ed Bain, who was the coach of the American Legion baseball team, who took the team, the Billings Legion Post 4, to 4 consecutive Legion World Series, including 1960 when Dave was the top junior pitcher in the country. He went to Hastings, Nebraska, and Billings reached the championship game against a New Orleans area team that had Rusty Staub on it. They were leading into fourth or fifth inning, and Dave got a little wild, and they pulled him and sent him out. I haven't been to Hastings, Nebraska, but I'm told it's this monstrous field. They put him in the outfield just in case. Bain thought, maybe I'll need to pitch him, use him as a pitcher in the late inning. And one of the New Orleans guys, I can't remember who, hit a long ball that went way out towards the fence, and Dave was trying to find the ball, and the roof fell in, and New Orleans got the championship. But so the other bronze is of Mr. Bain, who I knew, and 2 of his sons are still alive, who are friends of mine, and I'm contemplating doing a biography of Ed Bain, because he was not just known in Billings and in Montana, but back in the day, he was one of the best known American Legion baseball coaches in the country. And you got to understand, back then, we've just brought back high school baseball in Montana in the last few years, but we didn't have high school baseball for a long time. So if you were 15, 16, 17, you played Legion baseball in the summer. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was wondering, back in this 1974 all season, were you shocked that Dave McNally was traded to the Montreal Expos?
Well, that's a good question. I had just gotten out of college. I'd started my career in Grand Junction, Colorado. I wasn't a sports writer then. I later became. I guess I was sort of oblivious to that. I found out about it later. So I'm kind of neutral on that. When I look at that, you're probably more knowledgeable than I am. Everything I've read said that he felt that his arm just, he had had a history of some injuries, and he felt his arm just wasn't what it used to be, and that he was taking money from the Orioles. He needed, as he called it, he needed a change of scenery. So he says, okay, I'll take a trade. And they said, the Expos want you. So he goes to Montreal. And long story short, he goes there. They make some promises to him, as far as money and other conditions and moving expenses. His wife Jean even goes up there. Family, there were 3 kids then. They lived in Lutherville. She starts looking for a house, and the Orioles just don't live up to their promise. So he wins 3 games at the start of the season, then he loses 6 in a row, and then I won't spoil the whole thing. His fateful day playing the San Diego Padres, when he pitched against another Billings guy, a young pitcher named Joe McIntosh, who's pitching for the Orioles, Billings versus Billings. And things didn't go well, so he gets on a plane, flies back here to Baltimore, shows up on a Sunday night at the house in Lutherville, and says, Gene, I'm done. We're going back to Billings. And by then he had made arrangements, he and his brother Jim, who had, slightly older brother Jim, who had experience as a car dealership. They bought the preeminent Ford dealership in Montana, Archie Cochran Ford. I mentioned that to some of you. I didn't really know this till I researched the book. Archie Cochran was a younger brother of a fellow you've probably heard of, Mickey Cochran, famed Detroit Tiger catcher. And then he operated that. He and Jim operated that, and they also had a Volkswagen dealership pretty much until 2002 when Dave passed away. And in recognition of what a name that was, the Ford dealership never became MCnally Motors. To this day, it's, well, I think it's either Billings Ford or Archie Cochran Ford.
Dennis, look this way. There you go. Wasn't it Gene Mark still? Was he the manager? I think he was. When he was in Montreal.
Yeah, Gene Mock was the manager. Yeah, and the story I heard from, and he didn't tell anybody. He just kind of said, just left the ballpark. I don't know, probably showered, got his bag, and left. And later on, Gene and Dave spent some time in their retirement days down in Southern California. They were good friends with Gene Mock. Probably better friends with Gene Mock than he was with Earl Weaver. There was some friction.
Yeah, like we were talking about.
But yeah, it. Pardon me?
Was MCnally the greatest athlete to come out of Billings?
Not only out of Billings, but in 1999 or 2000, at the start of the millennium, Sports Illustrated was naming the greatest athletes in every state of the 20th century. Dave was the greatest Montana athlete of the 20th century, according to Sports Illustrated. Yeah, they had a big soiree for him. This is when he was already fighting cancer, but he was able to go there. And he was even.
Who's the second?
I don't know.
Is there?
I don't know if there's a second. There were some people who argued the University of Montana had won its first national championship in 1995, football championship, back when they called it Division II, and they had a great quarterback named Dave Dickinson who went on and played Canadian football. The Canadian Football League. Some folks said, well, Dave Dickinson, but they said the whole body of work. Dave Dickinson had his 3 or so great years in Missoula, and then he played some more in the CFL. And they just said, in the grand scheme of things, MCnally is it. And I agree. I have my MBA from the University of Montana, so I should be rooting for Dave Dickinson, but MCnally's it.
What's the population of Montana?
Just surpassed a little over 1 million. When I was growing up, it was about 550,000. Here's a little trivia fact. When I was growing up, we had 2 congressional representatives. Then they did reapportionment, how they do that. We lost our representatives, and then we've had enough population growth that we are the first state to lose and then regain back to two Congress people. So yeah, they made a big deal a few years ago that 1 million, whoever was, how they arbitrarily say Montana has just passed 1 million people. Yeah, it's not. Some ways better, some ways not as good as the state that I grew up. I'm a Montana native.
Where's most of the population?
Most of it.
Western or eastern part?
Well, from Billings west, you get out into eastern Montana, and a lot of it has been depopulated farms, and I come from that background too. My dad was a farmer, farmed sugar beets in a couple of counties over in eastern Montana, and couldn't make a living at it, so we moved to town. And that's happened a lot, where farmers have sold to bigger and bigger. It's just happened everywhere. Consolidation and bigger, and you go to places that I knew when I was a kid. And there's a house here, and then 5 miles away there's another house, and somebody is operating some monstrously big farm. I mean, in Montana, farms and ranches can be 5, 6, 10,000 acres. Just big. Not quite as big as Texas, but close. Yes, sir.
I know we talked briefly about Jeff Ballard also being from Billings. Is he Is he still living in that area?
Yeah, he's living. He took over. His father, Bill Ballard, was originally from Oklahoma. I don't know when they came to Montana, but his dad had a his dad's passed. Took over his dad's oil exploration business. He has. I'm not sure. He went to Stanford. I think he has like a chemical engineering degree or something that would make sense if you went into the oil business. Yeah. Jeff's very active in both the Mustangs and American Legion. He's still a baseball guy.
Yeah. Nice.
I think he won 18 games in '89.
89 he won.
Yeah, 18 games. Yeah, and then he had a bad car crash, and that was kind of the end of his baseball days. Yes, sir.
How did MCnally end up involved in the arbitration case that ended up leading to the site's decision? Especially because he was already basically at the end of his career, right?
Yeah, that's well. First, the background. Back in '74, they had started arbitration, and I've got the specifics. I can't even remember in my own book. There were several of the Orioles went into salary arbitration. Dave was the only winner. Dave also had a background of being a holdout several times. When the Orioles were giving him what he thought he owed, he'd say, "Well, I'll show up when I show up." But how he came to be involved in the Sites case, here's the long story short. He said that he was kind of in a unique situation. He hadn't officially retired. The Orioles weren't giving him what he wanted. He was back in Billings. Andy Messersmith was already on the case. Of course, Messersmith was with the Dodgers with Walter O'Malley, who was one of the richest owners around. And Marvin Miller was worried that O'Malley would dangle a big pot of money in front of Messersmith, and Messersmith would say, "Oh, I guess I'll sign." And then he gets to thinking, this is like June or July, maybe July, the McNally's had just moved back to Billings. And Marvin Miller gets to thinking, I think he was talking to, I can't remember, the lawyer for the Players Association. He said, "Oh, there's this guy McNally, he's out in Billings, Montana. Maybe we should contact him." So he gets on the phone, he says, "McNally, I need an insurance guy." So McNally's his insurance guy. And then the story got really interesting. John McHale, who was the big honcho for the Expos, shows up in Billings. And he says, he finds Dave's phone number, back when you could find phone numbers in a phone book. And he calls him up and he says, "Hey, Dave, I'm in Billings. I just happen to be passing through. Want to go out for coffee or something?" Dave says, "Sure." Goes for coffee. And the story I've heard is McHale says, "Okay, you come back next year, 76. We'll give you what you wanted. You know, when you wanted about $125,000. Plus, we'll give you a $25,000 bonus just for showing up at training camp." And Dave says, "Ain't going to do that." He says, "Well, okay, I'll make you this deal. You just show up at training camp. I'll give you $25,000. He says, "Nope, not going to do that." And later on, McNally tells that story to Miller, and they both have a big hearty laugh. How McHale just happened to be coming through. You don't just happen to come through Montana or Billings. He came there with a mission of mine. So Dave said, "My days are done." And just to add to that story, I did, when I was a young reporter in Billings, a young sports writer in '78, I guess, Dave was very well known for being involved in lots of charities, Easter Seal and stuff. I can't remember what charity it is. I'd have to look at my own story. I think it was a racquetball tournament that I caught him at. And the gist of the story was, and the way I let it off, he said, "Everybody asks me, are you going to come back to baseball? You're going to return?" He says, "No." By then, he had 4 kids. He was playing lots of golf. He was involved not just in his car business, he was involved in various business ventures. He was on the State Highway Commission, etc., etc. He was back in his element. He said, "I'm here. I'm staying. You know, I'm done with baseball and professional sports." You know, we all know of instances of people, whether it's sports people or people other people or other entertainers who overstay their welcome, for lack of a better word. They play or they do movies or whatever. People say, why didn't he or she quit 5 years ago when they were on top of the world? Dave just said, nope, I'm done. I want to stay here. He loved to play golf. He had a house out in the west end of Billings near the Yellowstone Country Club, and he played golf pretty much until his final days, even when he was struggling with treatment for his cancer. He came back and got a few rounds of golf in.
What type of cancer did he have?
Lung cancer. He was I think that he was a lifetime, he was pretty much a chain smoker. He tried stopping several times. I mentioned in the book and I think he had quit by the time he died, but he had this on and off thing with smoking. He said, the Orioles would say, you got to get your playing weight down to 190, 195. He'd say, well, okay, but if I quit smoking, my weight goes up, so I'll keep on smoking. So he had this thing with smoking. You know, his generation, lots of men and a fair number of women were smokers. So sadly, it was lung cancer that got him.
How did the Orioles sign McNally? Was that the first team that went after him?
Well, the quick story, you know, that was before the draft, baseball draft. He came in 64, 65. After the 1960 Legion World Series in Hastings, Nebraska, he comes back to Billings, and there were, I don't know if it was quite 10, but there were lots and lots of scouts there. The Yankees were there, the Dodgers were there, the Indians, everybody, because he was the top junior pitcher in the country that summer. And they all camped at the MCnally house, which is still there close to the campus of now, it was then Eastern Montana College, now Montana State University Billings. And it came down to the Dodgers and the Orioles. And if you know who Jim Russo was, super scout, he and what was his first guy's first name, Wilson, they got orders from the front office. You do not come home without getting MCnally. So they got him. For a reported, nobody has ever to this day said exactly, he kept it kind of under wraps, about an $85,000 bonus. And I calculated that in 1960, that was worth $750,000, $780,000 in 2023 money. But he just said, you know, in 1960, the Orioles had been here, about 6 years, and he said, they're on the way up, you know, got young pitchers. For whatever reasons, he thought he had a better shot of getting to the bigs with the Orioles than the Dodgers. But he could have been a Dodger.
Did the Orioles outbid the Dodgers for him then? Or
yeah, well, it was, I don't know how much the Dodgers were offering, but the Yankees were in there too. And what Russo said in his book is that somebody in the Yankees said, we're not gonna offer more than $50,000 for a pitcher. That's it. And Russo thought that was really, really dumb, because some guys are worth more than $50,000. Somebody in the Yankee brain trust, I don't know whether he had a chance of becoming a Yankee, how much of a chance he had become being a Yankee if the Yankees had opened up the wallet a little bit, you know. But mostly it was the Dodgers. The Dodgers, when it came down to the Dodgers and the Orioles, and he picked the Orioles.
So when did he sign?
When? Like September or October of 1960, and
1960.
yeah, he had to, and he didn't turn 18 until Halloween that year. So he had, as far as I know, as far as a contract, he probably had to have his mother sign the contract for him.
But George Weiss was the general manager of the Yankees back then.
Yeah, and he had, and speaking of the Yankees, he had pretty fair success against the Yankees. In fact, his last American League victory was against the Yankees in '74.
Wow.
The story I love is I heard this, I don't know whether I read it or heard it from Palmer himself. You know, that year, that fall, the Yankees were, they were renovating the house that Babe Ruth built. So the Yankees were playing at Shea Stadium. They come to town and they're rolling down Fifth Avenue in the team bus, and Palmer, sitting close to McNally, says, "Hey Dave, you're going to pitch a 3-hitter tonight." What does Dave do? He goes out, pitches the 3-hit shutout against the Yankees. That was his last game. He had a pretty fair record against the Yankees. So-so record. The team that really gave him a lot of trouble was the Minnesota Twins.
Now McNally was not a powerful fastball, right?
He was sliders, curves. I mean, he had an okay fastball, but he wasn't in the class of Palmer or Ryan or some of those speed merchants. He did the tricky stuff. In fact, okay, since you led into that, his last major league game in June of 1975, Expos against the Padres. Joe McIntosh, from a very prominent Billings baseball family, Joe's older brother, Bill, had been one of Dave's best friends in their Legion days. Bill is gone, and then the oldest brother, Tom, was a doctor in Ireland. He just died here a few years ago. They all played Legion ball. But anyway, Joe, back then, I think it was, there were telephones between dugouts. And Dave gets on the phone he knows Joe because Joe was the little brother of his best friend. Gets on the phone, he says, "Joe, let's make a deal. Okay, no tricky stuff, just straight fastballs." Joe says, okay, yeah, because he's talking to a guy who's 8 or 9 years his senior. Joe's about the same age as I am. I turned 75 this year. And they get out there, and the first time McNally comes up to the first time McIntosh comes up to the bat against McNally, what's he do? He starts throwing that tricky stuff, either his curveball or a slider. And he realizes the bet's off, and what Joe told me, Joe's a lawyer and sports agent out in Seattle, he says he swears he saw McNally in the dugout after that, just laughing his head off. And, okay, the bet's off. And I think he got McNally swinging on 2 or 3 at-bats on that game. And that was it. So it was Billings versus Billings for McNally's finale.
McNally had the last laugh.
Yeah, McNally literally had the last laugh. He snookered. I think I don't know. I think that was McIntosh's second year with the Padres. He had gotten a baseball scholarship to Washington State University, which had a very good college baseball team at that time, and then got drafted by the Padres.
Jim Russo, by the way, is going into the Oriole Hall of Fame this year.
He is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure glad I came across his book because, Jeff McNally, their oldest son, told me about Russo, so I bought it, found his book on Amazon, a used copy. It was a really fascinating story about, he devotes a fair amount of time to signing, in the book, Super Scout or whatever it's called, to signing McNally. Yeah, there's so many great players. Thanks to the Orioles front office, I talked to Jim Palmer and Boog Powell, and sure wish I had thought of the time to talk to Andy Etchebarren. I know he's been around 6 or 7 years, and also wish I had caught Brooks Robinson before his health went down, before he passed away. But still, it's been a wonderful experience. Even in Billings, we have I know a fair number of modest number of his Legion baseball teammates, including one guy. I'll tell you a little story. A guy who was a banker in Billings named Pete Cochran. He was drafted by the Dodgers, and he went to school in Colorado and was in the military, and I think, I don't know how much of a shot he had at the Dodgers. I think it was one of those injury things. So in '66, during the '66 series with the Dodgers, and he was one of Dave's best friends too. He happens to be in town. I think he's either in college down in Colorado. He's at one of the local sports bars. This is after the first 2 games out in LA, and this loudmouth in the bar says, "Orioles are going to win it in 4 games." And Cochran says, $40. He's true to his Dodger signing. He says, $40 says it ain't going to happen. It's not going to be a sweep. So he bet $40 against his former Legion teammate, one of his best friends, and they played golf until the end. They were that good friends. So, and I've seen at Gene McNally's house. Pardon me?
Did they play golf after the Orioles?
Oh yeah, they played golf. They played golf when they. Dave knew about that bet, but he said, "What the heck? Pete's still a good guy. I'll go." And that '66 series was so big in Montana. If you've heard this story, that a telegram with like 7,000 names on it. I've been to Gene McNally's house. She still has the telegram or the paper. Came to the clubhouse here, wishing him and the Orioles good luck in the series. Yes, sir.
Hey Dennis, tell them how McNally refused to play golf with Weaver.
Oh. Yeah. The story, I think Palmer told me this story, that in '73, there was some friction between McNally and Weaver, to put it nicely. And it's the end of the season. There were a couple golf courses, I mentioned it in the book, I don't know which one they were playing at. And they have a foursome. There was Weaver, Palmer, McNally, and I'm not sure who the 4th person was. Phone rings a Saturday morning at the McNally house in Lutherville, and it's Weaver on the line in October or so, after the World Series and everything. Of course, the Orioles didn't make it that year. And Dave picks up the phone, and I'm paraphrasing this. "Hey McNally, it's Weaver here. You want to go golfing today?" McNally says, "I only golf with my friends." Bam! Slams down the. They had an interesting relationship. The way Palmer told me is, it got to the point where all Dave would say was "yep" and "nope" to Weaver, whereas Palmer had some issues with Weaver too, but they could carry on kind of a civil conversation. But he said, Dave. And then one of the things that is attributed to Palmer is that supposedly Dave said about Weaver, the only thing he knows about, referring to Weaver's start in St. Louis, the only thing he knows about pitching is he can't hit it. Yeah. Now, if you've read, there's another book I highly recommend called The Last Manager by John Miller. Actually, Weaver, when he was growing up and when he was a young hopeful, he was a respectable hitter. So that wasn't totally the truth, but it makes for a good story. Yeah. Well, and before I forget, if any of you care to, I have a no spam email newsletter and a website. If you care to sign for that, I promise. And I'm a little negligent now. I try to send out something not just about the Orioles, but general Montana history. I'm all 5 of my books, 4 of them nonfiction, one when a coming of age novel, all touch on Montana history. So I try to talk about that, write about that, but I got to get back on the program. I'm really behind the 8 ball on that, and I promise I won't sell your email to anybody else. You won't get spam from me. You'll just get 500 or 600, 700 word bite of Montana history if you care to. And my business card is here, and I thank you for taking time out of your Saturday early afternoon to show up for this.
Thank you.
Who was the first Montana?